Hello, and welcome to this webinar presented by the IET's Cambridge Network. We represent folks in the Cambridgeshire area, but we're very pleased to welcome everyone from across the UK tonight and indeed globally. My name is Phil Zerngast. I'm the chair of the local network and I will be your host this evening. Now, before we come to tonight's speaker, just some housekeeping points to note. First of all, we will be taking questions tonight. If you think of something, please post it using the Q&A button, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen if you wiggle your cursor. And if we don't cover all the questions tonight, our speakers kindly offered to answer those offline, and we'll post them on the IET Cambridge Network website. We'll be recording the event tonight, and that will be available in about a week's time on the YouTube channel, the IET Cambridge YouTube channel. That takes us on now to our speaker tonight. And I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Prafull Sharma to speak to us. Prafull is the co-founder and chief technology officer of CorrosionRADAR, based in Cranfield in Bedfordshire. I think you also have an office in Cambridgeshire, Prafull. CorrosionRADAR is developing innovative corrosion monitoring technologies. Prafull has a PhD from Cranfield University and more than 15 years experience in industrial automation and sensor technology development. And he's worked particularly in the energy, aviation, and the chemical industrial sectors. So, without further ado, I will hand over to Prafull.
Thank you, Phil. Privileged to be talking about the corrosion radar and its journey today. I'm just sharing my screen. I would like to confirm whether you're able to see the screen.
Yes, that's working.
Okay, wonderful. So my name is Prafull. Thanks for the introduction. And today I'll be talking about an interesting topic of corrosion and how also entrepreneurial journey from an invention to a company which is making a global impact. So there will be two parts of today's presentation in the next probably 40 minutes. One part will be on the corrosion itself, the impact, the energy transition which is happening, and what is rust, what is corrosion, and how big it is a problem. And this second part of my presentation is going to be on an academic entrepreneurship. So going from academia to entrepreneurial journey, what it takes, what are my learnings at least, and what are the fun and challenges of it. So that will be second half of the presentation. So let's first things first. Corrosion, why we are talking about it. It seems to be a boring topic. I mean, for the researchers, it's very exciting. It's a scientific field, but it's among the big issues the world faces. Corrosion costs about more than 3% of global GDP. That is more than $2 trillion per year. So it affects all the sectors. That's why we are talking about it. It is everywhere. If you look around, the reason why we have to retire our cars after a few years is because of heavily corrosion. And that's the reason, same as ships gets retired, pipelines gets retired, industrial accidents happen, shutdown happens. So it's a huge issue, which goes unnoticed in many in common eyes, but it's among the top issues. And the industrial sector suffers greatly as well. So that includes all the petrochemicals, chemical sectors, oil and gas productions, or even fertilizers, all of that. So that's been a big problem, and normally day to day the conversations happen in the industrial sector. So today's discussion will be on the industrial sector and how there was a CorrosionRADAR was born to solve and address some of the specific issues here. So this cartoon pretty much talks about the day-to-day conversation which happens in the industrial world. For example, there's a manager and the supervisor and a technician who are talking about an issue of something called CUI, which is corrosion. I will talk about it in more details. But Rob is the maintenance manager, or he's having a budget to maintain their industrial plants. And the technician says, I have a big issue which needs to be solved. Please don't cut my budget. But the manager says that you have the best prevention processes like coatings, which avoids corrosion. You have the best practices in the industry called RPI, which I will also talk about. Yes, but still corrosion is happening. How can we locate it effectively? And then one fine day we find a leak, he finds a leak, and then the supervisor realizes that, hey, we need to increase the budget. How can we prevent it? So these are daily conversations happening in the industry. So let's narrow down a bit to specific issues of corrosion, because corrosion is a very, very wide topic. There are over 70 or 80 damage mechanisms of corrosion which have been identified. And we see in common life brown color rust, but it happens on pipes or material called carbon steel or iron, we call it. Now, the whole problem is the world is trying to move towards iron. Iron is trying to go back to Mother Nature and becoming more in the form of iron ore. It's humans who have actually extracted it and made it in an unstable state of iron, and hence the corrosion. So what happens in the pipelines, for example? Now, these are the pipelines in chemical industries, which are carrying toxic chemicals production, and they are insulated, for example. And insulations means you can't see the pipe. These insulations are seen everywhere, even in our refrigeration units. Insulations protected thermally, and every few years they have to be opened because they tend to develop rust. Now you see here, these pictures are coming from, say, a publication from Malaysia, which says a petrochemical plant have severe rust. If one of them leaks, nobody will notice, and there will be accidents. And invariably in this industry, a lot of accidents happen. And now we are talking about energy transition, net zero. We are talking about hydrogen economy. Now this issue is the core issue as well. Because if we start to use pipelines for hydrogen or carbon capture, it will have to deal with the unpredictable nature of corrosion. So this is everywhere. Now, a specific form is corrosion under insulation. That's why we're talking. CorrosionRADAR is trying to solve that, and and that's what I will talk about. Now, this issue of corrosion under insulation is a corrosion which is happening on the outside surface of a pipe like this, but remains hidden due to insulation. So it has become among the top asset integrity issues. Asset integrity is a common term used in the industry to maintain the assets, the integrity of the assets. Now, this issue of CUI is top issue not only in the UK but globally. So much so that statistics says more than 60% of the pipeline failures are due to CUI. So it's worth solving, and that's why we are talking about it. If you look at North Sea, for example, North Sea, there are so many offshore rigs. More than 10% of maintenance cost goes into corrosion and CUI. Now, this we are talking about multi-million dollars per year expense. Now, how this happens is if you look at the pipeline and its cross section, there's an insulation normally, and insulation is a boon. It's supposed to protect the pipe thermally, but over time, over many decades, people have realized that this becomes a devil when it traps water. So suppose rainwater comes in and starts to trap water, the external surface of the pipe starts to corrode. Even if you coat it or if you paint it, the paint starts to degrade because they are not designed for these conditions. And then corrosion happens, and if it remains undetected, it can lead to leakages. So to avoid this, and there are many technologies have been developed, but the industry, this particular industry, is doing just removing the insulations and doing visual inspections. Now, in the process, globally, billions and billions of dollars are are spent just to remove the insulation and watch it. Come on, this is primitive, right? I mean, in the age of internet and in the age of AI, we're still doing primitive stuff, manual stuff. So we thought, let's do something different. Let's automate and let's bring intelligence into the process. So this is corrosion. This is a specific case of CUI, why it is big, it's everywhere, and how a company is solving it. So in CorrosionRADAR, it's a spin out of Cranfield University in the UK, and it is on the mission to bring predictive element to corrosion. So how can we predict corrosion, when and where it will happen? It's a massive new global opportunity of massive scale. And this can be enabled by industrial IoT. Now, IET members must be knowing IoT and industrial IoT, where you put sensors and connect it wirelessly and start to monitor, and also with that data start to predict. So we are about that. CorrosionRADAR is about that, use of IoT for predictive analytics. Now, the current practice in the industry is on the left-hand side. It's very reactive. The industrial practice is there's a lot of human judgment as to, hey, I'm the expert. I know where the corrosion is happening, for example, and I will define where the periodic inspections are supposed to happen. So this is very similar to how we used to do automotive maintenance, and automobiles used to do periodic inspections and maintenance. Like every 6 months or every year, we go to do periodic checkups. Similar things happens in the industry as well. They do manual inspections every year just to be to do maintenance. But this is labor intensive and can lead to unscheduled shutdowns. There's a big safety risk. These are hazardous industries. Toxic chemicals, flammable chemicals can lead to accidents. So the emerging new practice which is happening is predictive. So how can we connect sensors to do continuous monitoring of the assets, and also combine it with the knowledge base of the corrosion science to understand the risk of the assets in a much better way? Basically, how can we make risk management more automated? Other industries have gone into this already. For example, our cars are not related to corrosion, but car maintenance is more automated now because there's so many things being monitored. Many other sectors, for example, financial sectors, are doing risk management in a very proactive manner. The finance industry is a pioneer of risk management by getting a lot of data and analyzing a lot of data. But this industrial sector is not is still coping up with the problem, and they're still trying to adopt this risk management. So predictive maintenance is a key word here. It's a buzzword, but it's also making an impact now. How can we predict and do the maintenance activity? So that is to minimize the labor efforts and improve safety and reduce cost. Again, I'm going into too much detail, some of you may feel, but it is important to understand why we are talking about this, right? And then I'll talk about the entrepreneurial side in the second half. So the idea was born out of technology of reflectometry, I would say. CorrosionRADAR branded it as electromagnetic guided radar, EMGR. Now that's a core sensing principle which was patented back in 2014, 2015, when I was there in Cranfield University during my PhD days. So this technology basically used reflectometric principle, the same principle which is used in cable fault detection. So the cable, if you place it along the pipe and let the cable be exposed to electromagnetic, say water, if water touches the cable, if it is exposed, the electromagnetic waves are interacting with water, then it will lead to impedance change of the cable, and then we'll see a reflection. And then we can convert that to understanding the pipe condition, say risk of the pipe or hotspots of the risk of the pipe. For example, in this case, there are these pipe which is day 1, year 1, year 2, year 3, and there's a cable on the top which is designed in a certain way, and there's an electronics which is probing that cable again and again, and this whole setup is under the insulation. So effectively, we are having a weather station inside the insulation. However, this is probing it frequently and starting to monitor where the water is getting accumulated because of impedance change. We can detect that on the cable. If we detect those are the locations which are supposed to be monitored or inspected rather than the whole blind inspection of the whole pipe. So this was recognized in 2021 by a global community of corrosion in the USA, Innovation of the Year, very happy about that. So this is the core principle: reflection of a wave on the corrosion or moisture sensors, and then we have to convert into risk methodology. So the core technology and the product turned out to be, if you see here, a pipeline, which is say typically in oil and gas, petrochemicals, and the orange colors represents the sensors here, which can be wrapped around or can be laid out in various ways, and this becomes almost like a weather station inside. So if water comes in, it will detect where it is, and this data will be transmitted to a cloud-based dashboards where remotely people can monitor it. Now, if there's a issue flagged and the risk identified, then people can go and inspect at that location. Now, this same sensor can be placed in zigzag fashion or in critical areas. So it's really embedded sensor inside the insulations. So how this impacts the industry is by optimizing the inspections. So there are two scenarios which I'm showing here. Again, this may be slightly more technical for some of you, but I promise this is probably the most technical one. So on the left hand side, there is an inspection needed. For example, this is a pipe and it is highly risky. So the inspectors will recommend that, hey, this needs to be inspected 100% by removing the insulations. Now, this is an over inspection scenario, because if you have a sensor in and it says the whole pipe is not red, it's not highly risky, only a localized region is risky. So inspection is needed only that locally. Now, this can lead to a different decision, right? Only a small narrowed down inspection. It may seem a mundane point, but effectively billions of dollars are spent annually on these kind of inspections. So if we can narrow down and make a fraction, then unnecessary inspections can be avoided, and hence less trips to the rigs, less trips by helicopters to the offshore rigs, etc. So it's a huge cost savings and carbon savings. But there's the other issue on the right hand side, which is avoiding under inspection. Under inspection means many times due to cost cutting measures, people do less inspection. So in this scenario, the pipe on the right hand side is green, but in reality, there's a particular section which is risky because there's a water goes in without anybody noticing it. And normally there won't be any inspection planned because nobody will know. But in reality, it needs to be inspected because it's a safety threat. So the sensors, if they're placed, say the scenario is on the left-hand pipe, if the sensors are placed, then it can pretty much say, okay, that location is risky. So you need to change your decision to actually inspect this pipe at that location. So this will avoid the under inspection side. Now, as far as this journey is concerned, it went through a long process, many years. So this is one of the case study of how it was tested by a third party. We got good partners in the UK. UK have a good ecosystem. So Net Zero Technology Center in Aberdeen have a mandate. It's a government and industry consortium to promote new technologies. So they funded these trials where independent rigs was set up. So you can see a pipeline and the sensors were wrapped around, and a particular location here was insulated, and the corrosive conditions were set up. So you can see this pipe and the sensor on the top, and this pipe was subjected to heavy corrosive conditions, say as simple as salt water. You can see corrosion developed over time, and then sensor was also corroded. So finally, what happens is this case study probably is clearly telling what is the outcome of the technology is. Once the system is deployed in hardware and software, it is transmitting data to a cloud platform. Then remote monitoring enables monitoring water, where and when water is coming in through a heat map. For example, here x-axis is a distance. Sorry, x-axis is the time and date, and y-axis is the distance along the sensor. So it's actually locating where it is happening. So finally, this is combined with the risk analytics modules. Now this is where corrosion science comes in, where corrosion risk and corrosion rates are estimated from analytics. And then coating risk, color coding is done based on the industry guidelines. And finally, it is located where the risks are high, and inspection and repair can happen. So this process is now being applied in the industry. So you see here another case study on a real plant, which happened probably a few years back, where this is in Netherlands, one of the production columns in a petrochemical industry. Leaks can be hazardous. It's producing hydrogen cyanide, which you can imagine it's extremely toxic. And this production column is 25-meter high. And they have to create scaffolding, spending probably some fraction of £1 million every year to create a scaffolding to access the insulations and open the insulations and inspect it. So they said, we don't want to create over inspection scenario, because most of the times we don't see as corrosion. So how can we make it more predictive? That's where the sensors were deployed on the top and the bottom. You can see orange colors, and then the blue box in the middle is electronics, which is using the radar principle and transmitting data. And you can see the sensors which were deployed on the surface under the insulation. So this is an example of how a weather station with a sensor can be placed inside. And now from then on, we know the conditions inside and start to analyze it and predict the onset of corrosion. So this can lead to huge cost savings, because now end users can take proactive measures, or scaffolding can be done only when needed. Rather than every 5 years here, it can be done in 10 years, so leading to huge cost savings. So in summary, before I talk about the entrepreneurial side, so this is an era of predictive corrosion monitoring. So monitoring can lead to data-driven risk understanding of the assets. In this case, we are talking about oil and gas energy assets. So early risk detection, that can lead to optimization of maintenance and reducing the unplanned shutdowns, which it continues to happen. Accidents continue to happen. But with these technologies, we can do predictive maintenance. Prediction is better than reaction. And then it can lead to corrosion prevention. And hence, this is our contribution to this community. So that brings me to the second part of the talk, which is the entrepreneurial learnings, because this is an idea which came out of the academia and now making global impact. CorrosionRADAR was also funded, venture funded by many investors, including the biggest company in the world is Saudi Aramco. And they are equity shareholders in the company, because corrosion is such a big issue. And hence, Middle East is also a priority sector for the company. So it's making a global impact, but it had its own entrepreneurial side of things, and it's a roller coaster ride. And I would like to share a few learnings as a researcher in this community of technical minds as to what are the key learnings. So the journey started in 2014, problem and the idea. So imagine a mind of a PhD researcher. That's what I was personally. Mid-career, after a stint in the industry, joined the Cranfield University for a PhD. So the problem starts with finding the problem is to find a problem statement in a PhD research. So what was given to me was, hey, we need to find corrosion. Can we have some technology for that in the PhD research? So the idea was, hey, let's make corrosion monitoring sensor. And this is for a specific case of under the insulation corrosion on the outside surface of a pipe, which is hidden under the insulation. So yeah, the idea came that, okay, let's put a sensor and let's use reflectometric principles, get a research grant, publish in a journal, get a PhD. Yep. So that was the thought process at that time. But something happened, something changed in between. Cranfield used to organize startup weekends. This is in the university, they used to promote entrepreneurship in the students. So I personally was exposed to that, and my partners in I will talk about my co-founders and partners in this. They Mehrdad and Shiraz, they were also part of these kind of activities, where in academia you see on the left hand side, normally we think in a certain direction, right? Which is great, introduction is literature review, methodology, results, conclusions, references. This is a typical thought process of a thesis. But then what we also learned is in the business, we talk about a very similar thought process, however, slightly differently. We also talk about problem and market opportunity in terms of literature and the solutions. The key difference here is the finance and the revenue, which we keep running away from. However, we have to probably learn it. So the two mindsets combined, I call it academic entrepreneur. And that was the exposure, privileged to have that, got exposure thanks to the university, where they organize startup weekends where the mentors keep coming, and they used to mentor as to how you can shape an idea. So I was inspired by that. And there were many learnings, and I would like to share some learnings here, that we have to leverage resources by being creative. So as a researcher, we think ourselves as an individual, and you have to answer to supervisors, but we can actually leverage the whole ecosystem. So there are equipments, technicians, MSc researchers who wants to do thesis. There are group projects. So in this case, CorrosionRADAR was born out of activities leveraged with all these groups. Each of these groups of MSc researchers somehow contributed. We were creative enough to do that. So the key learning here is, as a researcher, we have several resources at disposal. So we should be creative. So there are experimental setups, there are 3D printing, electronics available, 3D modeling softwares available. So and the people are available, great minds are available. So I think why not include them in the journey and create impact, and in the process shape the technology and the product. Leverage the ecosystem, another learning, technology, business, and connections. So in case of Cranfield, these are some pictures where you see here VC of Cranfield, and Shiraz and Mehrdad, these are my co-founders, and Rob is a kind of investor into the company. So we got an office space as a researcher. We got some office space that, hey, we want to do this activity. We got some laboratory space. It's an accelerator space. And I think in Cambridge University as well, there's so much of good ecosystem of this. So we have a office space there. That was our first office space. And we got a lot of Innovate UK grants and funding to initially make some prototypes. So leverage the ecosystem. Let's just don't sit in the office and do on your own. Go out and see what things are available, because a lot of people wants to support innovation. Then there are government grants like Newton Fund, Innovate UK, researcher links. There's so much of, especially in the UK, we have so much of government grants available. So I could travel to Mexico, meet key people, learn a lot of things in Mexico through researcher links. Then this picture shows in 2018, we got a lot of good grants, or even 2017, we got good grants. So you can see Innovate UK program managers and three of us, the co-founders, Shiraz, Mehrdad, and myself, we completed this project. Now, the key part is government grants are available to travel, learn, and innovate. And most importantly, de-risk the technology before venture capital or investors can come in. So that's very important, and we are lucky to have a lot of government grants. I think we applied for more than 10 government grants and got succeeded in probably 4 of them. And we had grants of about a total of more than £1 million in total to develop the technology before venture capital jumped in. Network, I think being interesting, meeting interesting people pays off. These are some pictures which shows that as researchers, we have the privilege to access to the industry. So this is one of the pictures where I was lucky enough to be talking to industry people, giving presentations about the idea. In way back at the time, we had a prototype. MBAs, interacting with them. Some of them became interns and some of them became employees of CorrosionRADAR as well. Then we had discussions with alumni of the university where some of them became investors into the company. So here's Robert Wright, who is among the angel investors. Robert Wright is the ex-CEO of Wizz Air, and he founded Wizz Air Airlines. And he wanted to give back to the university spinouts, and he became an investor. So networking is very important. It's very important to go out, talk to people, keep presenting, and that's how motivation comes in. So now here are some pictures of the production process. So speed is key. We were very lucky to not reinvent the wheel here. We were lucky to use off-the-shelf components, use available components for speed rather than reinventing the wheel. So as simple as these are the off-the-shelf available boxes and the electronics, Raspberry Pi. The early versions of that were made, and then we started going out to the market early on with off-the-shelf components. And now we have more customized versions, but initially it was off-the-shelf. Even the web portals, dashboards were available. There are plug-and-play dashboards available, which you can. IoT ecosystem is so improved and so matured now that we can use off-the-shelf, rebrand it, and go to the market. More importantly, it's important to go to the market without investing too much into the product. First, we have to make sure that there is a market for the idea using off-the-shelf components. And once you prove that there's a market, then you have to invest into the product itself with the right resources. Another learning is media. So leveraging media to reach customers is so powerful. So we were identified as top 5 predictive maintenance companies at some point. However, I still doubt that at that point. But because of that, we got a lot of exposure. A lot of customers came in. We continued to reach to key industry media, for example, magazines to cover us, write articles. Also, Cambridge ecosystem gave us a few awards, which led to exposures, and we got our venture capital money earlier, which also led to a lot of traction in the industry. Then we leveraged social media a lot. So you can see here a corrosion management magazine, which is Institute of Corrosion magazine. A lot of fan following, and we were covered on the front page of that for inspection and monitoring. And this led to a lot of inquiries. We used a lot of social media. So during lockdown, we started something called CUI over coffee. It's a webinar series of industry bodies. We hosted them, and a lot of people joined to have a conversation around this problem of corrosion. And we were covered in the Sky News as well. You can see Shiraz talking in the Sky News about new age companies in Cambridge. She could meet Rishi Sunak on invitation, where we were beneficiary of the future fund created by the chancellor to support startups during lockdowns, and we were beneficiary of that. So all this exposure led to a lot of customer interactions and progression. So finally, final slide, Acadepreneur, Invention to a global company. I mean, it's all possible. And thanks for listening. So back to Phil, David.
Thank you, Prafull. Thank you very much for sharing your entrepreneurial journey and for telling us about what you're doing, what you're developing here in the UK. Very interesting, very, very interesting. Before I hand over to David, perhaps I could kick off the questions with one of my own. You mentioned that your sensor detects moisture and corrosion. Does it actually detect the water and the presence of corrosion products, or both? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it detects water as a precursor of corrosion. It does not detect the corrosion directly, because this is a more prediction philosophy here. This is a very interesting place, right? I mean, whether we want to detect a parameter which is directly the parameter, or we want to measure an estimation. It's a virtual sensor philosophy that you measure water, detect water, and then estimate the risk of corrosion. So that's what we're doing.
Okay,
and a lot of IoT sensors are coming in that direction, that say we need not measure what we want to estimate. If you want to, for example, we have commodity sensors available in the IoT world, temperature, carbon dioxide, all that is available. Now, what can we estimate secondary parameters from that is a very good opportunity. And that's what we are also doing, that from moisture, can we estimate corrosion?
Presumably, as you build up a data set, that will improve your predictive capabilities in that sense.
Yeah, more the data, the better is the predictions, yes.
Okay. So I'll hand over to David Blake, my colleague in the local network, and he'll take you through the rest of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. I don't know if everybody can hear me okay, and I'll ask a few questions to Prafull about the sort of things that have been put forward by our attendees this evening. We've got quite a few already. First of all, with your mind on safety critical assets, how reliable is this actual technology?
Yeah, I think it's a very good, important point here, that we are dealing with safety critical assets. Lives are at stake, financial losses are at stake. And at the moment, the state of the art is the industry is dealing very manually on this. Anything deploying technology to make it better, any information is better. So as far as this technology, how reliable it is, we're continuously trying to prove that it can detect water very efficiently, very sensitively. And it has been proven that. Now, the point is not about whether the sensors can detect water or not and estimate the risk. The point is about how we can convert that information into actionable insights. For example, we are detecting water much earlier. The challenge is the asset owners are seeing this effect 5 years or 10 years in advance before actually the accident can happen. The challenge is to make them do an action in advance rather than waiting for that 10 years corrosion to happen. So the technology is kind of detecting early on. The challenge is somewhere else to take actions.
Okay, we've got a question here primarily about the sensors themselves. First of all, what material are the sensors made of? What are its strengths and weaknesses, e.g. for length, size, thermal stability, etc.? I think the issue is, can you sort of say something more about the actual sensors?
Yeah, so I think a very specific question on the sensor. So sensors, very quickly. So sensors are made of, it's a multi-layered sensors. I would say it looks like wire, like the normal twisted pair we have, or coax wire we have, but it's a multi-layered structure where the external layers being made of carbon steel, similar to the pipe material, but the inner layers are made of more dielectric material, which takes the wave forward inside. So it's a multiple materials. Now, dielectric material uses PTFE, which is high temperature material of polymers. The key part is these sensors are deployed on the pipelines, right? And those pipelines can have temperature ranges. The sensor should not melt. The pipelines can go all the way very high temperatures, 500 degrees Celsius, even 800 degrees Celsius. But the application we are targeting is less than, say, 200 degrees Celsius. And hence, we made our sensors to last to 300 degrees Celsius maximum. But on the other side, the sensors are also designed to tackle LNG, liquefied natural gas, which is a very, very growing market, especially in the case of decarbonization we are talking about, energy transition we are talking about. Those pipelines of hydrogen or LNG, they are operating at -200, -170 degrees Celsius. So our sensors, we have designed the materials, the polymers, to tackle those temperatures as well. So that's the strength of the sensor, but as well as that's the weakness of the sensor, where if the temperature exceeds those, then it will not work, or it will melt, so to say.
Okay.
The size of the sensor is probably 1 millimeter diameter. It's thin.
Okay, thank you. You've got quite a few comments coming in thanking you for your brilliant presentation. One of them is, so you've certainly made an impact with the audience, I think. Is it very expensive to actually install these sensors? I mean, presumably it's a lower cost than the cost of taking all the installation off, but I mean, what sort of costs are we talking about installing? Just laying a cable, or is there something more to it?
Oh yeah, the cost, I think it has to be cost effective to have a commercial success. And in this case, we estimate that the industry spends about, say, $10,000, I would call dollars for global references, so $10,000 per 100 meters of the pipe inspection to create a scaffolding. And our sensors are a fraction of that. Of course, it's not the cost, it's actually value, which we have to price it accordingly. So in case of new assets, this is installed right from the beginning, so there's no additional cost. But in case of older assets, we piggyback on the existing inspections where they remove the insulations, and
okay,
it's a piggyback process.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be cost effective. But imagine this industry, oil and gas in particular, offshore rigs, the manpower is so expensive that is creating a scaffolding is probably 70% of the cost of the inspection.
Okay. Can ultrasound techniques be used to detect corrosion in pipes?
Yeah, ultrasound techniques are actually the state of the art, but they are more useful for internal pipe corrosion. So if you imagine a pipe, the corrosion is happening on both sides, inside and outside. But traditionally, industry has focused on inside, because that's where the water is flowing or liquid is flowing, and then start to corrode. So metallurgy is designed mainly for inside, because that's what people understand. And for that, ultrasonic techniques are used to put it on the outside, send the ultrasound, and detect the wall thickness. Because the philosophy is the process fluids corrode the pipelines uniformly across. So if you measure one location, it is representative of the whole pipe. So ultrasonics are the state of the art for inside. However, external outside was ignored for a long time before people realized that external is also important, and that's where CorrosionRADAR was born.
Okay. A really interesting journey, rather than Germany. I have come across guided wave technology before. How many employees have you now grown to?
Yeah, guided wave technology is interesting technology. So just for the audience to be briefed, that we can use pipe as an ultrasonic waveguide. It's the same ultrasonic which is used on human body to see inside the womb or inside. Same ultrasonic technology is used to inspect the pipelines as well. We just send a wave. So in case of guided wave ultrasonic, the ultrasonic waves are sent along the pipe by putting sensors on outside. And then the wave propagates, and wherever there is a corrosion, they will be reflected back, and they can find out where it is happening. So it is quite prevalent, but again, there are pros and cons of every technology. It's an inspection technology. It's an expensive technology. That's so it's a kind of inspection rather than monitoring. Like people go physically, attach the sensors, inspect it, and come back, rather than put the sensors permanently there, because it's expensive.
Okay.
As far as how many we have grown, so we have we're a small team yet, but we are about 20 people, full-time, part-time, including 20 people company, and looking at rapid growth, hopefully, in the next years.
Presumably you don't do the actual installations, you outsource that, or let the oil and gas company do that. So you're not involved with that. You're just purely involved with the R&D and sort of organizing the manufacturer. Is that how it works? Yeah,
so that's right. We have to play with our strengths, and our strengths being a spin out of Cranfield and as a technology company is in the product and the technology. So we have to partner with various companies, service companies, who are much better at doing installations, and many times they are the contractors of the end users, oil energy companies themselves. the preferred contractors who are on site all the time. So we just specify how this is to be installed, and then they install it.
Okay. Comment here, excellent. Are there any scenarios where the sensors of corrosion are too spread out to provide a discernible signal against background? In other words, clutter and noise.
That's always a challenge. I think having a signal to noise ratio good enough is always a challenge. And I won't say there's a foolproof answer to that. There's always a noise, and we're trying to declutter the noise. And that's where all the minds of signal processing, signal analytics have to come in. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to continuously improve the signal analytics through signal processing.
Okay.
But yeah, that's an issue. That's continues to be an issue in all the sensors to have as high as SNR as possible.
Yes. Can you use this technology to detect leaks as well as corrosion?
A very interesting point. I think I would say yes. For moisture sensor, effectively we're detecting water ingress from the rain or condensation, but we are also trying to see whether this can do the leakages of oil, because the dielectric constant of oil is much lesser than water, and hence the sensitivity is lower. I think this competes in that sense from optical fiber type sensors. We are using microwave, but optical fiber are much longer, but they are also very expensive. And they were very efficient in detecting leaks. So I would say this can do it, but there are better technologies to do that, especially optical fibers.
Okay, an interesting one here on do CorrosionRADAR get the data from every installation, i.e. to build your predictive knowledge database? Do customers accept that? And if so, do most of them really require to keep the raw data locally?
Well, I mean, yeah, this is getting into details of nitty-gritties, tactics, problems. As a company, we have a challenge. We would like to have all the data to do all the analytics and prediction algorithms, but this is always a point of discussion and negotiation. Some of the companies, for example, we see in Europe, many companies are open to this kind of philosophy that, hey, fine, we own the data, or they own the data, but they provide us access to build models, to give them back those models. But many companies don't want to share the data,
No.
especially in some other geographies. They say, hey, our philosophy is all the data on the premises. We don't want to transmit anything outside. So, and then we go and say, hey, then you're not using the full power of analytics. But fine, our company does not allow that. So, there are these practical challenges of bringing innovations. How can we bring innovations and analytics when there are restrictions? So we are battling with that in various fronts.
That's probably in a lot of industries, not just your own, I think, is an issue. Does the proof of your prediction ultimately rely on physical inspection? In other words, do you calibrate the system by going along and sort of checking the actual pipework afterwards or before?
So so that's the ideal scenario, that whatever we predict, it's validated in the field. However, in this case, the corrosion is such a slow process. It takes many, many years. So the whole corrosion industry or monitoring industry have adopted accelerated tests in the laboratory to validate and calibrate before going to the field. And that's what we have done as well. We have calibrated or proven in the lab before we go to the field. And many times the end users force it that, hey, we want to see the laboratory validation in accelerated conditions before you deploy. So it's actually, accelerated in the laboratory philosophy.
Okay.
To prove it.
Yeah. Can the analytics present a forecast to predict projected effect and ultimate breakage using information about the strength of the carrying pipe?
Well, I think, so imagine this. I would say it's a mixed answer. Imagine this. We are detecting water, but ultimately we are translating that detection of water to how much risk that pipe have got. Now, strength of the pipe is a factor in that. The thickness of the pipe is a factor in that. The material of the pipe is that. And coating life. There's so many factors which goes into that calculation of the risk. So So yes, strength of the carrying pipe is one of the factors, but there are many other factors which goes into the calculations of the forecast of a
Okay.
risk.
Okay. What can we download the recording of this presentation? Well, we'll be putting it on our YouTube site once we've actually sort of edited it and sort of made it suitable for posting. I have a question. In fact, you know, I've had a lot of experience in the marine industry, and as corrosion is a significant problem on ships and marine installations, as you're obviously aware. I was wondering if you would see your company expanding into other areas in the future, or are you thinking of staying in the oil and gas industry?
Oh no, I mean, I think we'll go where the problem is. So who is ready to pay the money for the innovation, right? So oil and gas industry suffers a lot from this, but we are keeping an eye on the energy transition, say different types of energy sectors. We are already branching out to LNG, liquefied natural gas, which is replacing coal in the power. So that's a big sector in the marine industry, shipping, transportation. A lot of LNG is being used, LPG sector, hydrogen transportation. Wherever there is a pipe, there is a problem. So we are keeping an eye on that. In fact, a lot of inquiries are coming from fertilizer sectors, pulp and paper, fertilizers. These are all industries which many of them are located near the ocean and coast, where the corrosivity is very high, and they all suffer from that. So, but the point is about for whom this is a high value problem. The cost of leakage is high for whom, and that invariably is for toxic industries and as flammable industries. So we are keeping an eye on all kind of industries, including hydrogen in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting development, the use of hydrogen instead of natural gas. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
We've got another question that's popped up, really technical, but how much power does a sensor transmitter need? Can they be solar battery powered, or do you need to run out power out to the sensor locations? Yeah,
good question. In fact, you know, there's techno-commercial answer here. Power is low because imagine our mobile phone. We are using milliwatts of data transmission, you know, in a wireless transmission. Similar signal levels are being used inside a very confined sensor, but even a further fraction of it. The second, so it's less than 1 milliwatt, I would say, per measurement. Now, the interesting part is we don't need to measure in this industry every second, not every hour, but every day is enough, once every day. And that saves a whole lot of power, that we are using 1 milliwatt only for that 1 minute of data acquisition for the whole day, right? So that saves a whole lot of battery life. Battery is important in this case because we are dealing with you know, installations in hazardous environments, offshore rigs, which are very expensive to lay the cable. And that's where the IoT industry have a lot of opportunity to have battery powered wireless devices, which saves the cost of installation, because any putting a cable for electric cables are very, very expensive.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Prafull. I think we've actually come to the end of the questions, unless anybody's got any more, but I think we've had a good go at your good self and most interesting presentation. As I said, on chat and on the Q&A, there's several people thanking you very much for the presentation. Oh, there's a couple more just popped up. What surface area does 1 milliwatt cover?
So that's that covers only the sensor. So the whole energy is going into the sensor, which is 1 millimeter thick, and the sensor is about 100 meters long. So this energy is in that. Now, as I said, the sensor is effectively like a weather station inside the insulation. So it kind of representing that the whole 100-meter pipe of 100-meter pipe.
Okay.
1 millimeter, yeah.
Well, you're only getting thanks. You're also getting good luck for the future and best wishes for your future. So you made a good impression.
Thank you. I mean, watch out for the growth of the company, and you know, we like well-wishers.
Good.
Cambridge-based company going global.
Another one just come in. How do we invest?
Okay. Well, we like investors as well. Yes, well-wishers and investors. Yeah, welcome to our offices in Cambridge. You know, happy to have a coffee and no problems. I mean, investment is not only financial. Investment is also time and efforts and connections and goodwill. There are various kind of investments. So happy to have chat with various people.
Good. All right. I think there's one or two still good thanks coming in, so I'll hand back to Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And thank you again, Prafull. And I'll echo some of the comments that people have said. Thank you for sharing your journey. It's interesting alongside the technology that you're developing. And thanks to CorrosionRADAR for allowing you to present tonight too. And it's only through the generosity of people like yourself, Prafull, with your time that we're able to put on these events. So it is very much appreciated. Okay. So that brings us to the end of tonight's event, and that'll be the last event for this year. We will be back again in the new year, and please, everyone, if you want to find out what's going on, please look for the IT Cambridge Network, and you'll find details of all our events there. So on behalf of the Cambridge Network, I'll say thank you very much to everyone. Wish you season's greetings, a little bit early, but season's greetings and I hope to see you again soon. And you can all disconnect now. Thank you.
Thank you for the privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Prafull.